Are you working on your author career but struggling to get that first book published? Does the goal of being an author seem too lofty? Or thoughts of having multiple books and making a full-time living are as fantastical as living in Cinderella's castle? Welcome to Discovered Wordsmiths, a podcast where aspiring authors can be heard. Join Stephen Schneider as he finds and talks to authors you may not know, but authors that have gotten their foot on the author career path. Hear what they've done to get there and where they want to go now. Settle back. It's time for a bit of inspiration and advice. Come listen to today's Discovered Wordsmith.
Excellent. Let's talk about why it took me 15 years to write my first book.
That sounds good. All right. So besides taking 15 years, Dave, let me ask you this. What did you learn from the beginning to the end that you're doing different, or with your next book that you're looking to do different?
Excellent. Thanks for the question there. The first part that is most important for authors to learn is that there's always room for growth. We think we have this notion, if we get a book, when we're finishing that draft, that it's done. And now I said draft, not book. We need to think of it as a draft. Right. I thought it was done. I thought it was good. I got some feedback from beta readers, and someone said, man, it was short. Man, I could have used more. And I thought, they don't know what they're talking about. It is brilliant. Right. I sometimes have pride issues that God has worked on me kindly to help shrink down, and my family, my bride, work to shrink down to size. But I think it's wonderful. It is not. And so you have to then say, if I think it's wonderful, step back. Let's do some look at it again, do a thorough piercing edit, give it to somebody else who's good, who's close to you, can edit it. Pay for an editor, pay for a private editor. That's the publisher's job. Well, your stuff isn't good enough to get to a publisher, quite possibly. Pay for someone to edit it, look at those revisions before you're shopping it around, which means you need to invest in this project. Yes. I was always of the mindset when I began the process that all the money flows to me and there's very little capital outlay. I've got a computer, clickety-clack, I'll type on my keyboard, and then I will have the goal. I'll print out a copy, I'll edit it, it will be golden, I will query the agents, and then the money will flow to me post-haste. No. You've got to invest money. It's like any other job you would do. This is a part-time job or maybe a full-time job if you're good enough down the road. You have expenses, you have costs, you have to make sure things are professional, you want the best quality of product going out there. That's before anybody outside your immediate circle sees it. Right. Then you beta test it. Then you send it out, you can do some of that there. Then you are looking for endorsements. And this is the first major endorsement on the front cover that I've gotten in my years of writing books. Now, I've gotten endorsements from friends who are writers, but this was one I got it from an author named Thomas Locke, who's the pen name for Davis Bunn, one of his names that he writes under. It took me 18 years from the first time I met the man to him, for me writing something good enough for him being willing to put his name on it. And when he did, it was good enough for him to put it on the front cover, and people see that and they go, oh my goodness, that's good. Well, what'd you do for that? It took me 18 years. I had to meet him, get to know him. I was a fanboy, if you will, for quite a while. Every 6 months to a year, I write him an email. Oh, loved your book. This is great. A few years back, I did a blurb from one of his American releases for one of his books. And then I'm thinking, okay, do I ask him? Do I ask for the endorsement? What do I do? He gave me some advice through a screenwriting buddy of his for a screenplay I'm working on. And then it got to the point where I'd asked him before. He says, no good. This time he said yes. He would endorse, and he would look at it, he'd consider it, and he liked it. So it takes time. It takes time to develop contacts and connections. Everybody you meet is not going to be someone who's going to get your book published, but might be a friend that can help you out, give you some advice, or just commiserate with you along this long, strange, terrible journey that is from writing the first draft to getting it in somebody's hands.
Right. And what you're saying about it's a draft and editing and stuff, what I personally found is I had to keep writing and keep writing and keep writing and gain that experience and get the hard feedback and get more hard feedback and have someone tell me this, because I didn't even have enough experience at the beginning to understand some of what an editor was telling me. And I, like a lot of people I'm discovering, when I wrote my first thing, great, I wrote it, boom, done, sent it to an editor, come back, 20 pages of notes, red marks all over. And I'm like, well, that's stupid. They don't know, no, I didn't know enough to know what I didn't know. And it took a while to get that not only confidence to listen to what they were saying openly so I could improve, but also to understand that what my first draft is a first draft and there's a lot of things I can work on. And along with that, now my first draft is even better because of all the things I've learned.
Yes. I see a lot of it. The editing process is very important. It can feel adversarial at times, and I've struggled with that, where I'm arguing with them and it's a fight and it's a combat. And then I have to ask myself, which I think is the hardest part of the writing process, is the thing I'm fighting for worth saving?
Right.
Is the editor right? And like, either it's bad or it's not important, or is it vital? And I'll give you a great example from Fool's Luck. My editor with my publisher, we're having a back and forth regarding the political convention. And I'm saying it is absolutely crucial because it is for the narrative. I think it is. The convention, part of it was, and then the inauguration. I think it's the inauguration to clarify. Is the inauguration necessary? Well, you went through all this. I think it is. And then the editor also said, well, what about the ending? And I thought, the ending's fine. And I looked at it and going, no, okay. And I reworked that. And we're talking, I probably added 1,000 words. Uh, that ending is now much better. People that read it say, wow, that's better. People that knew the previous one say, wow, that's better. So one thing it was worth fighting for because I think it was integral to my story, and we agreed on it. The other one, I was wrong, just flat out wrong. And I needed to go back and to myself and say, well, is it good for the story? Yeah, maybe she's got a point. And she absolutely did. And she helped me make that a better story.
And that's hard, and again it takes experience, and you have to come to the realization that every word, every sentence is not a golden sentence and word, that your stuff, it can change in that. And what people remember is not the individual words and sentences, it's the overall story, it's the characters, the feeling they had. So you could change every other sentence in the whole book from what you had originally, and the people aren't going to remember one sentence or another. It's the end result. And editors, that's their job. They don't always get it right necessarily, but if you're telling an editor, hey, 80% of what you said is junk and I'm not going to listen, then you're the one with the problem.
Oh, absolutely so. And sometimes there are the individual words and phrases that are moving and powerful. And the ones that are the best you fight for. But other ones, sometimes I ended up saying, okay, sure, why not? It's a reasonable change, no big deal. It changed a little bit of the wording if they think it's better. I didn't have much of an argument. It's funny, I used to be a reporter for a newspaper, and so Associated Press writing style is ingrained in my brain. That is not what they're editing on. And so sometimes the issues with commas or other capitalization rules, they're small things to me, but it's just how I write. It's just how my fingers move on the keyboard.
Right.
And that gave them some challenges here and there. We had a fight over or discussion over the Oxford comma. I think it is unnecessary and pointless. People that are editors think it is absolutely wonderful and cherished. They're paying for my book. I'm not going to argue over the comma. We'll put it in. But I have an opinion on the Oxford comma, which is the kind of things writers do.
Right. Yeah, I had a popular writer basically tell me, he's like, who cares? Just change it and move on. It's not such a big deal. It doesn't change your story.
No, it
And
doesn't.
that's the important thing, you know. And it's the characters and the feeling that really matter. And that, unless you're like horrible, the editor is helping you to improve that.
Right, and making the character more relatable, the character would do something realistic or not realistic. If I have a different word for the emotion, if they cried versus sobbed versus wept, okay, sure.
Right.
If it conveys the idea that the person was racked with emotional pain and guilt and suffering, that's all I care about.
Right. So how many times do you think you revised and edited this manuscript over 15 years?
The first book, yeah, when I was looking at Chasing Deception, which is my first novel, that was the first one. I had a bound copy of it. It was at least a third less than it ended up being. So what I did is I wrote it. I got some feedback for a couple of years. I fed it to publishers, and then I just put it aside for like a decade. I couldn't do it. I failed as a writer. There was no point. And I sat around. I lived the rest of my life, and I did teaching and other things. Then I thought to myself after a while, I'm going to go back to that. I'm going to take a look at that. I'm going to try that out again. I'm going to give it another shot. I'd done some extra writing, put some other stuff and wove it in there. And then I tried again, and I got more rejection letters, and I eventually went into had an agent for a while. You couldn't place it. Wasn't a bad guy, just couldn't place the work. And so I then went independent publishing, and even then, I paid for editors and process like that. There, I think I didn't. I paid for some, but not as much as I did books 2 and 3. And that's another part of the process. The editing is probably the most important part of the process, and you need to pay for quality. You need to pay for somebody who's good. Try them out, test them out. I've had people pay for bad editors, pay a lot of money for bad editors for their genre, or they weren't a good fit with the writer. They may not be bad people, but they weren't a good fit for the project. So find someone good, have them pay for quality, and then use that quality to create a good product. So yeah, I put the book away for a decade. 8, 10 years, I just couldn't do it. I'm not going to write anymore. I'm done. I tried that dream. I had to get mature myself as a human being, I think, to be able to come back to that. Thankfully, the process now is usually I drafted this book 2019, 2020, and was able to publish it in July of this year, 2021. So it's a
Nice.
lot less onerous than it used to be.
And during this whole process, were you like taking any classes or in any critique groups or anything like that to help you?
I did. I went to a writers conference up in at Mount Herman in the San Jose Mountains in Northern California. I went a couple of those there. I got to meet with some people. I got to learn from them, take notes on fiction writing. I had as a reporter, did a story on a friend who had written a book, and he was part of a group. It was an encouragement group. It's not critique, which is intriguing. They're a creatives encouragement group, and it's different. And they would go and sit and encourage you. You'd have a meal together, and we did it's a religious groups of some singing, some praying. So it was just like a night of encouragement. And I can tell
Nice.
you that idea of being around other creatives who are, frankly, some of them a lot better than I was, and they're still a lot better than I am, struggle with the day to day stuff. That was encouragement too. So then, in growing my writing and doing a lot of work on my own here and reading some better authors, I sort of grew into that. But I definitely had to take some training, take some classes. I did some recent stuff on screenwriting last year to help out with that process. And with screenwriting, when I dove into that, writing partner of mine, he's like, okay, this is different. This is how it works. It's not the same way as novel writing. The novel we're going to take, which is my second novel, and adapt, we're going to change it. You have to be okay with that. That is hard. That is like your baby. That is your precious little one, and they're going to do bad things to it. And so that's part of that where you have to let go again. And my partner, he's published a film, produced a film, excuse me. He knows what he's doing. And we're working on this again, but that's gone through several edits. And that's where he's writing, I'm writing, we're talking to each other, we're collaborating together. My friend of mine has written a book on the Inklings, the group C.S. Lewis and J.J.R. Tolkien was in. It's a book called Bandersnatch.
Yeah,
She's in my creative
I've
group.
got that. I've got
Yeah,
that book. It's from Kent State Press, which is like 8 miles from me.
it is. Diana Glyer is a good friend, a real good friend. And she talks about the creative process with these folks who are encouraging each other. And
Mhm.
when you read that, you realize, my gosh, we're talking Jack Lewis, we're talking C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and others are sitting there arguing over L's. And they're arguing over elements and stories, but they're also encouraging one another. Um, at a place where they're gathering and chatting there, and you need that collective encouragement, or it's going to fall apart, or you're going to be the silo guy or gal writing, and it's just going to be miserable. I don't know how people like Hemingway and Steinbeck and Fitzgerald, I mean, they had their groups in the Lost Generation, how they do it because it is hard. So you need that encouragement plus ideas here, plus feedback that helps you grow as a creative or writer in particular.
Yeah. And that's part of the actual reason I started this podcast because I felt when you get online, you're on some of the Facebook groups or whatever, all you ever really hear about and listening to other podcasts, it's the writers that are like, oh yeah, I made 300,000 this past month, so it's gone up a little bit. And it's like, I can't even relate to that. I'm not at that level. It doesn't inspire me to hear somebody like that. So I wanted to talk to people that had pushed past the hardship and got something published. They're not, New York Lights yet, because I think that being that close to the golden ring is a little more inspiring. It's like, okay, I relate to this guy. I feel like I can push on and, I can reach the heights that they've reached and move on from there. So that was part of the reason for the podcast.
And it's appreciated. I have a very ambitious goal as a writer for this book, not to lose money. I don't want
That's
to
a
lose
good
money on
one.
this title. That's it. I've
Yeah.
lost money on my other titles. I don't want to lose money on this title. And I've even got my publisher talking, hey, let's look at some of the awards to enter them in. I'm like, okay, sure. That's awesome. If people think it's that good, we're going to jump onto the award circuit. I still want to lose money. I would like to
Yeah.
make up and recoup my costs. And so
That's
when you're at that point, okay, if it sells some great extra copies, praise be and be thankful. But I am not sitting here saying this is paying for my car, it's paying for my house. I wanted to pay back the cost of the editor and the advanced copies that I bought. And a few people read it. We have a fun chance to chat. I'm a happy fellow, and you need to have that. Unless you're Stephen King, John Grisham, Kristen Hanna, and Janet Ivanovich, you're someone famous. Sue Grafton, who's passed on. Great, good for you, Daniel Silva. Otherwise, we're just trying to make enough money to make this to be not too inexpensive of a hobby. Okay, that's pretty much
right.
where I am as a writer, and have a little fun and hang out with some people. That's
Right.
where I am.
Yeah, if I fly my model airplanes, I'm going to be putting a lot of money into it, and that's all that it happens. You don't you write because you enjoy it and you love it, but it can get expensive unless you're just writing for yourself and putting it in a drawer.
You know,
So breaking even's a good goal.
it is. I've got a friend of mine who wants to write a book, and I said, okay, what's your goal? Do you want it for your family? Do you want 5,000 copies sold? And that's a different approach. You
Yeah,
need to kind of frame up what you're looking at, what you're going to do, and what you're willing to invest:
yeah.
time, money,
So
effort, resources, that kind of thing.
so what are you doing to market the book and get the word out?
Excellent. Again, I had made contacts through a writers group I was in and social media, and I've actually got a blog tour coming up in about 2 weeks now. And I've contracted with a blog tour organization, a company where they've have people been doing some social media posting. They're amplifying what I already have out there, and then I'll have an official blog tour about 2 weeks straight. A new blogger every day, a couple bloggers every day, reading, posting, sharing. I'm doing wonderful podcasts like yours. I'm working with my fun folks at Ambassador International, my publisher, where I'm doing social media posting. They're reposting those things and sharing on those as well. I've done 2 book signings already. Hopefully, my local Barnes and Noble, and we're coordinating with them to get one as well. An event in my local library. Just the kind of things I've learned over 15, 20 years of writing, how I get into places. And it's amazing once you have a traditional publisher or at least a good press release. I walk into my Barnes and Noble. Oh, can we get a book in here? Well, do you have an ISBN? Here's my press release. They go, oh my goodness, color, picture, all this stuff, all my socials. Here's your endorsement. Okay, let's see what we can do for you now. Get you up there
Right.
in the local authors. We'll get you, an author event. We'll do some other placement out there. So it's building that. It's all about building, building, building. You're not going to be famous overnight unless you lose a limb or save somebody from death and destruction. Otherwise,
Right.
you're a normal Joe or normal Jill, just like you and I. And it takes years and years and years to build that up to a point where you are someone who is known. And like the book Bandersnatch that we just talked about a minute ago, is a friend of mine, and she's been a C.S. Lewis scholar for years. She's done other books that are great, but Bandersnatch is the one that caught on and people know about. She's got was it Company for Deep Heaven, which is a book that their students did about the C.S. Lewis space trilogy. That's coming out August 3rd. Well, she's taken her honor college students' work where she's a professor, and she's taken her C.S. Lewis experience and interwoven those. But that's taken years to do that here. And now she's doing podcasts and interviews and things like this here, but that takes time. And so you've got to realize if you want to put out a book for you and your friends, piece of cake. Go to Create Space, pick another platform. It takes time, a little bit of work, a little bit of money, you're fine. You want to become a writer, you want to become a novelist, an author of note and some significance. That's time, money, and investing of your resources. That will take considerable effort. You have to figure out how much it's worth it to you, how much you want to do to make that a reality.
Yeah. And at what point, what stage? Because you mentioned getting an ISBN, and I think that's important because it's very easy to self-publish a book nowadays. Really, I mean, you just get on Amazon, hit a button, and oh, I'm self-published. I have a book out. But I think because of that now, and there's so many people getting into it, the bar is raised a little bit, and the libraries and places online and people aren't just going to, oh, there's a new book out by this author, I'm going to buy it. There's 500,000 books I could buy in the last week. So that professionalism is what's starting to set people apart, I think. So even if you just do that first book and move on to the next, as you go and you want to become more professional, you've got to start doing these things like ISBNs and stuff.
And you also have to realize that your first book may not be the one that people know you for. You've asked several questions about my previous trilogy. Those were my only books until this hits. This is the
Right,
book that is good enough for people that are traditionally publishing to pick it up. And
right,
so, therefore, this becomes a book I talk about, but I have a segue into my other books. I have a little card saying, "Hey, you like this character? You're gonna love this other guy to pick up the old ones here." So, looking at your back catalog, marking that as you move forward. It's about your body of work. My wife's working on a trilogy, and then she's got a really good standalone book. She's currently writing YA, young adult novels. And she's thinking, well, if I sell my standalone book right now, they'll ask, what else do you have? Well, I've got a trilogy right back here.
right.
So thankfully, she's learning again from all of my mistakes and errors, and I've made plenty of them about how to be ambitious, but also to be patient. That dynamic balance, I haven't quite figured out yet, but I'm working toward. And that's helpful in the process as I do things like traditionally publish and improve the caliber of my work.
Yeah. And, you mentioned it may not be your first book. When I think John Williams, I think Star Wars, Indiana Jones. But like he also did the theme song for the original Lost in Space. But that's not what we know him for.
Well, and to think right now, since it's August, you hear John Williams all the time if you're watching the Olympics. That's the
Yes.
piece he wrote in the 80s. And that Olympic fanfare is something we've played for decades. Maybe you
Yeah.
know him from Schindler's List. The violin solo in Schindler's List, Remembrances, chills me every time I hear it because I've seen the film and I've used it in the classroom sometimes. But that was later on here. The fact that he did, the later Star Wars pieces, these are later on. But his body of work, when you hear it, because you know John Williams, you know what a John Williams soundtrack sounds like. I hear a piece, I
Yeah.
go, that's John Williams.
Yeah.
Hopefully, when they read books, they say, hey, that's like, I like that. That's Dave Millbrandt guy. I've heard him. I want to get
Right.
some of his other stuff. And
Right.
hopefully, my other books, which have their own flaws, are good enough. When people buy this book, Fool's Luck, they'll say, his earlier stuff's okay too. I'll pick that up too. And I've
Right.
got some people that didn't know I was a writer going, "Oh, I'm reading your early stuff. I really like that." Like, well, if you like that, you're really going to like the new stuff because it's written a whole lot better than the earlier stuff I wrote.
Right. And using John Williams analogies a little more, he also directed the Boston Pops for years. And there are people that know him as the director of Boston Pops, and they almost are surprised that, oh, he wrote all these soundtracks. And to them, that's not who he is. But he wouldn't have had that opportunity without all the success writing the scores.
Absolutely, and people might know me if we get the screenplay off the ground here as someone who's written a film, co-author,
Yeah.
co-written a film, and great. Well, I've also done books too, and dabbled with other things. I have a nonfiction book about helping high school parents help their students do well. It didn't sell anything. I was like 9, 10 years in the industry. I'm a veteran teacher. I had a cover. It was fun. Went nowhere because I didn't have enough platform. But hey, now that they're reading
Right.
my book, they might go, "Oh, high school teacher. I'm gonna pick up that one too." Who
Right.
knows? With your body of
Nice.
work, you put it out there. People buy it at different times. If it sells copies, okay, I make up the money that I lost when I printed that book. I'm all happy.
Right. Right. So when you're writing, what tools and software do you use to write?
I'm a Scrivener kind of guy. I
Okay.
like it. Scrivener is a good platform for me. I tend to make notes in Microsoft Word or Pages, depending on what. Probably Pages because I tend to use my laptop where I haven't bought the Microsoft Word. So I do outlining. I became from a pantser to a plotter. Those are the fancy terms now. Fly by the seat of my pants. I like to plot. I like to outline now. It helps my story go. Someone was telling me who's a professional author, writer as well, that he liked the pacing of my book. And I'm thinking in my head, well, I really worked to outline it so that the pacing worked out. So do the outline. I've got another book in my head right now where the dialogue keeps writing itself. So I need to start outlining that book. I'm doing research because it's got to be real. My most recent book, I had a medical drama as a sub story here. I needed someone that went through some pretty tough stuff. So I reached out. I said, "Hey, can you talk to me?" And she poured her heart out, and I just reflected that pain and suffering in this story. It's not my brilliance; it's just reflecting it with some different character names that fit my narrative. And that is important to get real life elements to it. You need dialogue that sounds realistic. So talk it out. If you never say, "Whither thou shalt go to thine home," we don't talk like that. "I shall arrive at your domicile shortly." Hey, text, "Be there in a minute."
Right.
How do I shorten that? How do I condense that? How do I talk naturally? I live in SoCal, so Spanish slang introduces itself into my speaking because that's how people talk in LA.
Right.
So it's got to feel real to the time period, real to the characters, real to the emotions. If you're writing a World War II drama, I don't need shortcuts there and phrases. If you're writing Edwardian England, like in Downton Abbey, please, contractions not nearly as much. Thank you. So making it real, making it tangible here, and those are important parts of the process to me. Telling that story. First draft is getting it down in my head on the keyboard out. Second draft or second go through is okay. Polish, change, and I will go through with the red pen. It's cutting, cutting, cutting. My wife gets the next draft. My lovely bride is out there editing that. Boom, boom, boom. If it's cheesy, she will say it is cheesy. I need to accept that. If it is good, if it makes she's happy, it's a good joke, she'll smile. If she'll put a sad face if she cried. If she actually cried, I've done my job. Hopefully it's not over a typo, but it's over real good content. So it's not just me, I've got to move other people. And that
Right.
my writing must inspire others to have a feeling, a thought, an emotion, to laugh, to cry, to sigh with relief or joy, excitement, what have you. It's got to move them too.
You mentioned dialogue. I'll do a shout out to a friend of mine. He calls himself the dialogue doctor. He
Mm.
actually, in his day job, he writes scripts for AI learning. And from that, he has gotten a lot of experience in dialogue. So he's offering his services to authors to help with the dialogue of the characters, so to help you bring out the best dialogue for each character that you can. So shout out to Jeff Elkins, the dialogue doctor there.
Hey, we need people like Jeff out there that are encouraging good dialogue, both in AI, but also in the life of our writers here. I noticed for me that it should sound like a well written movie, not like how we
Mm,
talk, but I've said like three times now in the last 45 seconds, but a little bit polished, a little bit up here, and a little bit more humor than you might have exactly. Although I tend to be as sarcastic as my characters, that sort of bleeds through in my writing. But you want the dialogue to be believable. I can hear someone saying that, as
right.
opposed to thinking that's a really good line. It's really well formed and it's grammatically correct. If they're 15, she or he doesn't talk like that.
Right.
That's not what they
Yeah.
say. I had one of my characters was, attracted to this one boy, and she says in there, "The heart wants what the heart wants," and the dad's like, "That's exactly what every father of a teenage daughter wants to hear." And the mind's like, it's a real piece of dialogue, and I've heard that kind of conversation, from parents and teenagers and whatnot. Being a high school teacher really helps with teenager dialogue because I hear it all the time,
Right.
good, bad, and otherwise. Uh,
Right.
and so that's kind of fun too.
Right. All right. Well, Dave, it's been really fun. Good talk. Before we go, though, what last minute advice do you have for other new authors?
I would advise other new authors to take time to learn your craft, to read widely and well, and to surround yourself with people who will encourage you. Sometimes that means critique and improve, but often you need people that are just going to say, you're doing a good job. People who know you're doing a good job that will encourage you along the way in the process. I try to be open and free when people ask for help with ideas, often students. And I'll do so if I help the student edit a book and get it published. I really want to encourage people. But I'll say, you want me to be honest? Yeah. Okay. We're going to go down that route. I'll tell you look lovely or handsome. I'll tell you're a fine, wonderful person. You want me to talk about your writing? Okay. This is problematic. This is something else here. So you need people that'll push you along the way. The idea of iron sharpening iron is an old religious metaphor. It really is important in this process because you can be the most frustrated writer of books that five people have read, or you can be people that be the writer that people have read a lot. You get to point two by having people telling you how to get there, and that's very important here. And you make connections. Don't ask the person you just meet for an endorsement or help or something wonderful in the first meet. This is a hey, you're awesome. I love your work. That takes time, but when you're good enough, they're like, oh yeah, I'll do that for you, and you partner together. I've been amazed at the people that I've known now for years that help me out. Like, let's work together. And I'm thinking, yes, that's great. It took me a while to get there.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, Dave, it's been really great this afternoon talking with you. I'm glad you could take some time and let everybody know about your book and a few advice tidbits on for authors.
Awesome. Thank you. Hopefully, you get a chance to pick up Fool's Luck or some of my Jim Mitchell books. But beyond that, as long as I've been able to encourage you as a writer or a reader or whatever stage you're at here to improve where you are, to grow where you are, and to get better. We're all getting better. There's always room for growth. And hopefully, if you do that, that's my goal for today. So thanks, Stephen, for the chance to chat. A little bit about John
Said like
Williams
a
on the side, too. That's just fun. But the
yeah,
writing's important
it's
stuff.
you said that like a true teacher, let me tell you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Discovered Wordsmiths. Come back next week and listen to another author discuss the road they've traveled, and maybe, sometime in the near future, it might be you.